There you go.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for being here. I know some folks are still trickling in, but we want to go ahead and get started because we do have a full agenda. Welcome to the November 21st Social Equity Working Group meeting. Our chair could not be here today, so I will be acting as chair, and I'm going to call today's meeting to order at 9:35. Before we get started, I would like to ask today's interpreter to introduce themselves and walk us through how to access interpretation services for today's meeting.
Announcement from interpreter. To use the interpretation feature, please scroll to the bottom of the Zoom screen where the meeting controls are. Click on the interpretation icon, World, and select English as your language. If you are joining through the Zoom mobile app, cell phone, tablet, etc., please press the ellipsis, then interpretation, and then choose your language. Finally, click on Mute Original Audio to not hear the original Spanish low in the background. Headsets are available for interpretation. If you are in the meeting room, please check out a headset from the receptionist in the lobby. Aviso por parte del intérprete. Para hacer uso del servicio de interpretación, favor de desplazarse a la parte inferior de la pantalla de Zoom, donde aparecen los controles. Haga clic en el icono de interpretación, globo terráqueo, y seleccione Spanish, español. Si está utilizando la aplicación móvil de Zoom, celular, tableta, etc., presione los puntos suspensivos, luego interpretación y luego el idioma. Si no desea escuchar el audio original en inglés en el fondo, por favor seleccione Mute Original Audio, silenciar audio original. Contamos con auriculares disponibles para el servicio de interpretación. Si se encuentra en la sala de reunión, favor de pedir auriculares con la recepcionista en el vestíbulo. Thank you.
Thank you. Now we want to take a moment to acknowledge the land that we call home. We acknowledge the harmony that's existed between the land, nature, and its original peoples who have since endured displacement, persecution, and systemic oppression. We pay our respects to the unceded territory and homelands of the 18 tribal nations in our region, the most of any county in the United States. This land has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced them for many generations in a relationship of balance and harmony. As members of the SANDAG community, we acknowledge this legacy. We aspire to learn from Indigenous traditional knowledge and experiences in undoing the injustices of the past. I also want to take a moment to recognize that November is Native American Heritage Month, which celebrates the essential contributions of Native Americans to the land and its people. We encourage everyone, of course, to take some time to learn more about the history and culture of the tribal groups that are Indigenous to our region. Now we're going to review the meeting process for both working group members as well as members of the public who would like to participate today. For working group members, as always, if you want to speak, just feel free to raise your hand so we know. Everyone has an iPad in front of them. Today's agendas and the supporting meetings should be up on them. I think everyone knows how to use them. Clerk, can you please provide us a quick reminder on how the public comments will work? And before you do, can I ask that we keep public comments to 1 minute so we can be sure to get through all of our agenda items today?
Thank you. And before we move on, I would also like to confirm that we do have a quorum with 9 of 12 voting members present. And for public comments, members of the public that are in person, please complete a speaker slip from the back of the room and hand them to staff, or you can bring them up to me. And you will be called when your item has completed its presentation. If you're online on Zoom, raise your hand before the end of the presentation and you will be called to speak by the name or number that shows on Zoom. Thank you.
Thank you, Tessa. Do any members of the group have questions on our procedures before we continue? Okay, great. We will start our meeting with item number 1. Item 1 is member and public comments. Tessa, are there any public comments for this item?
Thank you. I have 2 in-person public commenters on non-agenda items. Cesar Javier, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Piorita Javier.
Asa lang
Good
umpisa.
morning.
Asa lang umpisa dito na?
Yes.
Good morning. The owner of Toxic, a meeting home business, has renewed its business tax permit for $38 fee annually. City Treasurer's Office has no regulatory authority. Sign the application, no question asked. But don't forget to pay, and you can do what you want in our business, in your business. City Code enforcement says, number one, ceramics kiln business is exempt from permits. In parentheses, City Code Rule 11, paragraph 8, which means the owner can locate, build, construct, and operate.
And your time has
anytime
expired.
They
Our next commenter, Cesar Javier.
Thank you. We come here because we sense that this is the pinnacle of bright people from the region. Our city is failing to address equity aspect. The rules are faulty. The implementers are failing. They allow this kind of business in a populated area. And it falls exactly by science that we are in the right forum. We asked help from you, representatives of the different cities of the region, bright, honest, wise people, help us. I don't see faces from the city here. Are there from city of San Diego? Please help us. Please, because this is an
Thank you. Your
issue
time has expired. That
exactly
concludes the
within your
non-public
agenda.
comments.
Thank you so much. Thank you, ma'am, sirs, fellow citizens.
Thank you, Tessa. Do any working group members have comments or questions on items not on today's agenda? Yeah, Lisa.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. I wanted to bring a really great book that I would recommend for SANDAG and planners. It's called Inclusive Transportation, a Manifesto for Repairing Divided Communities. And if the approach, like is described in this book for civic engagement, was considered and embraced a bit more by SANDAG, I think it would prevent some of the frustrations that are happening right now in San Isidro because of the bike infrastructure and engagement that happened in 2017, 18 is just now being implemented for the last year. And what it's created, because there wasn't real follow-up and connections on specific design and impacts, what we're dealing with is tension with parking and lack thereof. And there was, parking issues before, and this has exacerbated the issue, not because CASA is pro-parking, but CASA is pro-quality design. And what people are frustrated about, and the feeling is as if we're frustrated about bikes and bike infrastructure, but what we're frustrated about is poor design and not enough connections and conversations and follow-up with community and residents that were directly being impacted. And so I would just really strongly suggest that, it's going to be hard the next time SANDAG does something in San Isidro, because there's mistrust, there's a lot of discontent, and it's going to take a while to repair that. And so I just really hope that you all take time, planners specifically, take time to really look at what authentic engagement looks like for the new year.
Thank you, Lisa. We hear you on follow-up after engagement.
Good morning, everyone. This is Belen with Mid-City Can. I just want to share that we are celebrating our 35th anniversary tonight, and that means it's a celebratory day, and we're honoring the work of the community members we work with. It's the legacy of our volunteers and team is a 10-year commitment to see youth transit passes in the region at no cost so that the youth can get anywhere they need to. And we're just excited to continue to be part of this work with you and finding solutions to really tough problems, but that are worth thinking about. Thank you.
Thank you. Congratulations, Belen. I know that's a lot of work, so we appreciate you still being here today. Okay. I have one update. There will be no December Social Equity Working Group meeting. So our meetings after today will resume in January. And the invitations for the 2025 series will be updated for everybody after today. And now we'll proceed to approving the consent agenda items, which today includes items 2 and item 3. Item 2 is the October 24th meeting minutes. Item 3 is the 2025 Social Equity Working Group meeting calendar. I do need to announce that we will have to make corrections to 2 dates on that calendar. Somebody else noticed. The February meeting should be Thursday, February 27th, not Saturday, February 22nd. And the March meeting should be Thursday, March 27th, not Friday, March 28th. So if you could make that note, and then we'll send out the updated schedule after the fact. Do we have any comments from members of the public on this item? Clerk.
There are no public comments on the consent agenda. You have not submitted a speaker slip for this item, so I'll go ahead and call on you, but you'll need to submit a speaker slip for consent. Staff will help you, but you can go ahead, sir. Come to the podium. Okay, we will get you the speaker slips for you to complete, but for now, please come to the podium and you can speak on the consent agenda, which is the minutes from the last meeting and the calendar for next year. You get 1 minute. And just for the record, this is Cesar Javier.
Yes, ma'am. This is all about toxicity that we have been experiencing since 1984.
And sir, I ask that you keep your comments
And I will be briefly
That-
saying, because
they
all
need
of
to
the
be related
items,
to the items on the consent agenda. So it needs to be related to either the minutes from the last meeting or the meeting calendar for next year.
I understand, ma'am. My X-ray is that it's clear. This is all about inequity or equity issue, which we are trying to design a rule, hopefully implement it honestly and wisely. We chose, pardon us, we want to share our experience so that our planners, our rule crafters and implementers would be shared. These are the jewels coming from the roots, from the bottom. And one is our community is left aside. We are the poorest in the finest city, southeastern. I stood here because it's all related in all the items that is consent. Please hear us. Hear us. Fast traffic problem, unattended poisonous creek, you know,
And
the
your
murky
time has
water.
expired.
Thank
And that concludes the public comments on consent agenda.
Thank you, Tessa. Do members have any comments on either of these 2 items on the consent agenda? Okay. Now we'll move on. As a reminder, you don't have to be present in order to vote on the meeting minutes. May I please have a motion to approve the consent agenda? Thank you. Motion by Carol. Thank you. Motion by second. Do we need to call for a vote or can I?
Nope, we can just do raise hand votes. It's a motion by Carol Lewis and a second by Lisa Cuestas to move the consent agenda as amended. If you're a yes, please raise your hand. Any noes? Any abstentions? And that motion passes unanimously with those members present.
Thank you. Moving on to our next item. To kick us off, Brian Lane and Ashley Wiley from SANDAG will share an update on the transit fare discount study and discuss next steps for the transit equity pilot that includes the Youth Opportunity Pass. And I'll pass it to just Brian, not Brian and Ashley.
Just going to say that. No Ashley today. Hi, everyone. Brian Lane, Senior Transit Planner. I think you all know me. I've been here multiple times. Happy to be here. I'm going to talk about the transit fare discount study that I think we brought to you a couple times over the last couple of years as we were prepping it and getting ready to do the outreach. And then we had your assistance with our outreach. But just a kind of some high overview of this. This came out of the 2021 regional plan, where for the first time we actually had the fare discounts applied in future years towards trying to increase ridership, do equitable transit planning, things like that. But we didn't have any really specifics in that plan. It was just apply X dollars every year starting in 2029. And so the goal out of that was to really talk to the public and what kind of fare discounts would the public and the communities like to see in the 2025 regional plan. So that was our main goal by doing some research on best practices and what others have done, learning the community's priorities, and then trying to see, then looking at the data, which programs are most feasible that we could include in the regional plan. This kicked off back in 2023. We did most of our outreach in September, October, November of that fall, and then did with the survey and the public outreach pop-ups, and then kind of finalized the report and produced that earlier this year. There's a link to that in the staff report in this item that you can click on if you want to dive deep into the whole thing. It's a great report, but the first few pages have like kind of that executive summary, so you can kind of get the high level. But if you want to really dive deep, there's tons of data, tons of descriptions about what we were doing with the whole project. It's a pretty great report, kind of proud of it. And if you have questions, as always, feel free to ask today, or if you didn't get the chance to fully read it, feel free to email me or call and ask further questions. I'd be happy to talk about it. So as we started working with our community members, our stakeholders, MTS, NCTD, we devised goals for the program. You can see these. I think they're all the kind of things that we all want in terms of a transit system that's equitable and gets more ridership. I'm going to kind of go a little fast today. Sorry, because I know Cecily's bringing the purple line later, and I think most of us really want to hear about that. Mimi and I are bringing the rapids next as well, so I think you want to hear about those. But so some of these things I'll just kind of skip over. But again, if you want me to go back or anything, let me know, and I'll be happy to. We did the best practices research, looked at 7 other agencies around the country who either had like youth programs that were free fare for all programs, or even just various discounts, and just kind of got some good background data on them and what they were doing. And that helped inform us and the stakeholders on what kind of things were out there, how much they cost, what kind of bang for the buck you're getting with those types of fare discount programs. Again, we came to you, we talked about this, but we did a ton of public engagement, did the surveys, online and paper, a bunch of in-person pop-up activities around the whole region, South County, North County, Central. I attended various existing community events that we reached out to you guys to help us identify some good ones to do. It was kind of over the holidays, so there actually were some really good ones where I think we got a lot of good input from folks, because there was a lot of attendance at some of those events, and I appreciate your help identifying some of those events. And then we obviously presented multiple times to the Mobility and Social Equity Working Group. Those activities were really neat. We had the dot map type of activity, and we had the thing where you were given 100 fake dollars and you could invest it in certain things. One of the first ones we asked was, choose your top 3 discount programs for fare discounts. And the results on that was the low income was the highest, senior ones and then Youth Opportunity Pass. I mean, these are ranked, but it was really kind of close between all three. I think I have a chart later that kind of shows between this and the surveys where the total ranking was. It wasn't like any of these kind of totally popped out. When we were speaking to people at these in-person pop-up activities, they all kind of told us, well, yeah, we all love the YOP, but if you have more money, these are some of the other things we'd like to do. So it's kind of what we're hearing. And you know, these are kind of informal results, but we still wanted to make sure that we were kind of getting those that feedback from everybody. And then the other thing we asked was how we'd want to invest your transit funds. That's where you had your $100 and you placed it around the board. Again, it was kind of spread out a bunch of things, but frequent and faster transit was the number one thing. We've been hearing that over and over from everybody. That's, you know, a key component of a better transit. Safety, obviously, and then the fare discounts. And again, these are ranked, but like as well in the next slide from the survey results, there were a little bit different results on that. Again, just I don't want to make it seem that one was just because it's third, it's, you know, it's last or something like that. They were all still kind of really equal. From the survey results, it was kind of very similar. Low income was number one again. The Youth Opportunity Pass on this one was number two, and then all student discounts was number three. Investing the transit funds, again, fast and frequent service was number one. Service hours made it up to two. That means expanding the amount of hours earlier in the morning, later at night for transit. And then fare discounts was right up there as well. So we ended up analyzing, I think, 9 total kind of fare discount programs. The first one was basically the baseline. It's continuing the Youth Opportunity Pass forever, keeping the other small discounts that are out there today, the senior discount, the senior disabled Medicare discount. And I think there's some other smaller discounts, but that was our baseline. And I think we just wanted to kind of throw this chart out there just to remind everyone how great the ridership has been since the YOP started in April of 2022. That's the far left number on both of these charts. That's before YOP, and then YOP started in May 2022, and you can see the jump and then the climbing of either the ridership, which is the chart on the left, that's total rides given in any month for youth, and then the one on the right is actually the blue is the actual number of youth riders, the individual riders. So my kids both have the Pronto Youth Pass. They count as 2 people on this on any given month when they rode, but if they rode 5, 6, 7, 10 times, that number is then over on the other side. So to us, it was still great to see just also the number of youth that had the Pronto Pass and were using it at least a few times a month, and then just how many times they were riding in a month. So again, that was the baseline for the programs we analyzed. And then we analyzed the 8 others. And this is where we started diving into, you know, small fare discount type programs to the 9th one, which is free fare for everybody, which obviously would be very expensive and very popular and get a lot of ridership, but again, very expensive. And so as we were talking to the public on, you know, what would you like? And even when we were doing the Youth Opportunity Pass, you know, we were considering you've always been asking for the YOP to be up to 24 and under. And as we were talking about the social equity pilot and the Youth Opportunity Pass, we only had, you know, $7-8 million a year at that time to pay for that program. And, you know, I think it was the consensus amongst us during that program that, yeah, let's do the 18 and under. We can afford that today. When we started talking to MTS Density, what it would cost to expand that to 24, that's when we started finding out you're probably talking, you know, $15, $20, $30 million more a year to expand it to that group, because the 19 to 24-year-olds is a huge percent of our ridership today. It's great. A lot of them are college students, but there's also just a lot of other people who don't have a car yet and are riding transit. And once you turn 18, you're paying full fare. And so that 19 to 24 is a big part of the agency's fare revenues, which is important to them to keep their programs. Unless, you know, SANDAG can come up with all the magical money to pay for all the fare revenues, they do count on those fare revenues. So the second one was obviously just expanding that to the 24 and under. The third one was a mix of that. The fourth one was the low income program. And so I think we modeled that one just using the 100% federal poverty threshold How we'd actually roll that program out, we wouldn't be sure, but maybe we do 200% poverty thresholds, that type of thing. We have to figure out how expensive that program would be, how many people in the region probably could afford or be eligible for that type of a program. We'd have to really get into the weeds as we go into that. But, and again, in the report, we kind of dive deep into exactly what we modeled and what we were looking at. We had a program for special user types, just reducing that. That's kind of the seniors, veterans, things like that. We had number 6 was 0 fare for those same folks, just making it, free fare for just those special user types. We modeled and looked at fair discount for just higher education students, including, those going to technical schools and things like that. Just as a way, and maybe as a proxy for the 24 and under kind of a thing, but just considering students rather than just all youth. And then the 8th one and the 9th one, again, was that more towards the high side of maybe a discount for all users, really like maybe 50% off, I think is what we modeled. And then 9 is the 100% off. So, we got ridership results. Our consultant was able to model this. They got how much ridership you may get when you do these various programs, how much it might cost, how much more service you may need or security you may need to add to the system to help provide, because if you make it free fares for all, you're going to have a lot more riders. So the agencies will have to add more service to counter that ridership, which is a great thing. But so again, a lot of our key takeaways between the outreach we did and the data results was, and this is what we really heard from folks, is while we'd love, rolling out fair discounts, really the first thing we really want to focus on is that frequency, service improvements, and safety. Getting that out first, getting transit better, faster, so people actually start riding it. Keep the youth opportunity pass. I think we're all agreeing on that. And then if we do have more funding for fair discounts, really try to figure out a low income type of affair. So I think that's what we're going to kind of show, or we're putting into the regional plan for 2025 is obviously we still all have, and I think Cecily and I presented the regional plan last month to you guys, and the investments we have, there's tons of investment. I said I was super proud of what we have. It's, between 2035 and now tons of service frequency and all that. I just don't want fair discount programs to get in the way of that, or to be something that people are arguing about or our board are arguing about. I want them to really start rolling out the more service, the faster service, the new rapids that Mimi and I are going to talk about in a minute, things like that. And if we do get a lot more funding through other measures in the future, then let's really start considering a low income program. So just a reminder, this was kind of a follow-up on that transit equity pilot that Zach Brout and I had worked on with you over and got the YOP out of. We did have some initial proposals out of that, and some of those we wanted to increase some services on some bus routes in certain areas. Both in the frequencies and in the spans. We were really highlighting weekends and nights and early mornings to do these increases on. The YOP was a part of the proposals. We had talked about maybe some Blue Line Express service and actually MTS is about to roll that out, I heard, in a couple of months, the overnight, like a overnight express bus route from the border to downtown when the trolley doesn't run, or even just daily during the day express service analysis. And just a reminder, the service enhancements that we had talked about were those earlier first departure and later final departures, the improvement to the frequencies during those times. And then we identified a bunch of routes that we would like to prioritize for enhancements. And again, we ended up not doing any of this part of the social equity pilot because at this time, it was like 2022, the operators were still coming out of the COVID and they had driver shortage issues. And so they said we really can't add service right now because they cut back a lot of service during that. It was, it was kind of a bad couple of years for transit. So we just focused on the YOP and rolled that out, but this is still on top of our minds. Enhancing routes and prioritizing which routes do get new service enhancements is still, again, on top of our minds. And we have identified these. And as we can get more funding into the region, we'd like to make sure that these are prioritized towards the top and then start working on other routes as we move forward. So next steps, we finalized the report last summer. We've informed the regional plan that, low income fares would be the best way forward for fare discounts. We'll keep collaborating with the transit operators on some of these enhancements in underserved areas. They are pretty much all the way out of the driver shortage. Now they're telling us they have a fiscal cliff, right? And I think we all hope Measure G was going to pass and help fund new services. So we're going to keep working with them to try and figure out how we can keep securing funding for the service enhancements. I think we all know YOP is here to stay, but we don't have a dedicated full funding source for that yet either. We're still lobbying with the state, hoping the state can come up with something. Federal, who knows now with the next 4 years, but we can all hope. But again, just still trying to figure out ways to keep some of these things moving forward. So with that, I appreciate it, Chair, and welcome any questions from the committee.
Thank you, Brian. Clerk, do we have any comments from the public on this item?
Thank you. I have 2 public comments on item 4. Cesar Javier, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Caro on Zoom.
This is to inspire you because you're working hard. And I must plead to you that this is our supra law. The law says man must live in a green pasture by the still water. I interpret this as clean air, pure water, clean food, clean and safe neighborhood. That's the law. And thank you. Partly you're doing it, mobility, circulation element. We are not to compete with you. Again, to encourage you to honestly and wisely implement this to the optimum, meaning available. If I just enumerate, it must respond to the issue, must
And your
be
time has
adequate, sir,
expired.
timely,
I'll call on
efficient.
our final commenter for this item. Caro, please go ahead.
Good morning. My name is Carolina with the Environmental Health Coalition. I just wanted to thank you for the report and the analysis. It's very consistent, and it is exciting to hear that there's clarity that frequency enhancements is a top priority for the public. It's what we've been witnessing on the ground and what transit riders have been asking for many years now. And so the report is exciting to see so much consistent with what we're seeing on the ground. So I wanted to thank staff, and I'm excited to look through it more closely. Thank you.
And that concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you, Clerk. Now I'll open it up to comments from members of this working group or questions. Belén.
Thank you, Brian. I just want to say that I have utmost respect for you and your team, because working with you on this program was a community partnership between SANDAG and the community. And we support everything that's on here, the low income fair program, seniors, youth. So let us know how we can help. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions for Brian? Jesse?
Just really quick, just again, kind of thanking Brian. I think the key takeaway, right, is kind of like we need to really prioritize the service that we currently have, the discounts that we currently have, before we start thinking about, possibly implementing other subsidies. And of course, with that, preserving YOP, and also to making sure that we implement just in general, make transit better, right? A better experience for those who use it. So thank you for the presentation and for the great study.
So thank you, Brian. I have a question. Forgive me if this has been covered before, but I know that you're talking about prioritizing and some of those more frequent stops, which is really exciting. And I was just wondering, I saw that you were prioritizing in terms of like the pollution that's going on in certain communities, and I understand that, and I thank you for that. But I'm wondering if there's also like community input that was taken into consideration for identifying some of those routes in terms of what they're seeing on the ground and what's preventing them?
Right. So trying to remember how the picking the routes was more of a, we had a stakeholder, CBO, kind of a stakeholder working group during the whole social equity pilot process. That was more like internal. It was all virtual, I think, during that time because it was kind of still COVID. But we looked at the CalEnviro screen to kind of figure out where the most impacted areas are, and then talked about some of the routes that kind of have okay frequencies or don't seem to run late at night. Looking at that, that's where we started identifying which routes probably would be the best to prioritize at this time. I think we presented a couple times either to mobility or this group and then transportation committee to get further input. But I think at that point it was like, yeah, those seemed like the routes that seemed to make the most sense and would have the best bang for the buck, I think, for that.
Sorry, so in the future, will there be ability for like the community to have a little bit more input in terms of what they'd like to see? Because when we do community outreach, that is like the number one thing, especially with like working families that are trying to get several of their students to school at the same time,
Right.
And try to get it while they're not taking public transportation and not being late to one or the other. So I'm just wondering if there's going to be an avenue for that in the future.
Yeah, definitely. I think we'll at that point start working closely with MTS and NCTD as well to make sure that it's not just a SANDAG led thing without them. So with them trying to figure out where the best places to put the new services or add services.
Okay, thank you.
Hi, Brian. Thank you for the presentation. I have a question about the transit fare discount study in particular. For discounts for students, have you looked into like existing programs at higher institutions that already provide discounts? And is there a way to leverage those already discounted fares to provide an additional one? Or even just looking at how they fund those discounts already?
Yeah, and because I was kind of hurrying with this, I didn't talk about, UCSD has their UPass that they charge the students. The students voted on it 10 plus years ago, I believe. And it's like $70 a quarter that gets them unlimited transit during that period. They're about to re-vote on that again, I heard, in a few months to get it going again. And they're going to include Coaster and some other NCTD services this time. That's been a great program. The ridership up in that area is amazing because I think more of that UPass and as well as the YOP up in that area. SDSU's been talking about that a little bit. All the colleges have the opportunity to buy discounted passes from MTS and NCTD, and they can work out arrangements with them just so students themselves can come one by one and buy a discounted pass for the semester or quarter or whatever kind of system they're on. But the UCSD, what's been going on there has been amazing. And so SDSU's kind of been talking a little bit, I think, with MTS on if we could run a student referendum like that, because a universal pass like that, it's super, super cheap. $70 a quarter is is an amazing price. It includes other things. UCSD, the UC system skims a high percent of that $70 themselves to help pay for other things and some great things actually. So only X percent of that goes to MTS and NCTD, but it's for MTS and NCTD, it's a great program because it's kind of guaranteed funding every quarter when that money comes in. So if more universities could get on with that, it would be amazing. And Zach and I, when we were doing some of this work, had started kind of reaching out to some of the colleges and universities, but I think more can be done on that end. And if more universities and San Marcos, Palomar, Southwestern, some of the big ones, City, can get on something like that, I think MTS Entity would be able to offer even steeper discounts as a total because now you have that much more guaranteed funding every quarter. It's just not easy for us as Sandaggers to get into that realm. It's and I think there's a countywide meetings now and then, so we've been trying to insert ourselves a little more into that, but I think that would be amazing if you could start that ball rolling and get it snowballing. Yeah.
Thanks so much for the presentation, Brian. Really I just echo all my colleagues. It's good to see that the data is reflecting what we're seeing on the ground, and appreciate your efforts to uplift that and these projects within SANDAG. You kind of alluded to some of the recent funding challenges, Measure G, not coming through, a lot of uncertainty with the new administration. This may be sooner than you're ready to think about it, but just curious if y'all are having conversations about where funding might come for these projects, if there's opportunities for the working group to support that, even if it's as simple as like letters of support and things like that. But just curious what y'all are thinking about for funding. Yeah, I'm not high enough on our food chain here at SANDAG to be part of this, but I think, we do have, and we bring it to the board, and the board's going to start thinking about, as we talk about the regional plan, it's, billions of dollars, and how do you actually but that's where we have the chapters in the regional plan where we talk about near-term implementation. I think that's where the money really hits the road for the next 5-7 years of what can we actually do and pay for and start thinking about to really reach those 2035 goals that we have. One of the things the board does and our government relations teams does, and they're always looking to Washington and the state capital and talking with lobbyists on, what's coming, what's the plan, where's some big funding sources. We have a specific, and I don't know exactly what it's called, but it's a plan of how we will kind of reach out to Washington and the state on what are the priorities for the agency in terms of getting them to either run bills or ask them to do things like that. So they update that annually, and I'm not sure when the next one will be, but that's kind of where a good spot, when you hear that one coming, is to make sure that there's very specific things in that this is going to be our priority on how we lobby and work with Washington and Sacramento. Thanks for sharing that. That's really interesting, and would be maybe something, a presentation maybe for the group someday. Thanks.
Sorry, Brian, one more question. Is there a way that we can see regionally how the Youth Opportunity Pass is being used, like in the different sectors of the city? And maybe I just don't know about it. Is it on our website?
Yeah, there's awesome. And I was just working with the data guys last couple of days. On our open data portal, there's a Youth Opportunity Pass section. It's down the very bottom right of that. But if you go find our open data portal and then click on that, in the open data portal is pretty amazing. You got to be kind of a data nerd or tech nerd. You can click around in each thing and you can really dive deep into the charts and all that. And then we have route by route data as well. And then a map that shows the routes that have the highest ridership, and it's kind of color scaled, I believe, to show the routes. So you can move around the whole county and see like where the routes that are being most used by youth. Obviously, trolley is going to be this massive highest number, but then you can kind of see the other bus routes as well. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Now we'll move on to our next item. We're going to hear from Brian again, and he's going to be joined by Mimi, who they're going to present an update on the initial planning for 6 new rapid routes.
Okay. So this is another fun one. This is kind of where the money hits the road kind of a thing. Rapids are a big part of the regional plan. They're a big part of our current system right now. There's 11 routes out there. It's kind of subjective on which routes we call, but they're very popular. They're well used. And they help connect the network. But in the regional plan, we in the 2025 draft regional plan that I think we've started showing you all, we have 35 new rapid routes proposed by 2035. That's a massive increase to what we have today. And I think the identification was, we really need to start planning some of these now, or we're never actually going to get them open and built by 2035. And so a priority of the board last October was to fund $26 million towards 6 rapid routes that we could start doing the design and planning for. That budget item was exciting for us because that now actually gave us the right to get started on 6 of these routes. And so Mimi and I are going to be the project managers on a few of these. Other staff may help manage some of the routes. We're going to talk about kind of like what the plan is for these 6 routes over the next few years and how that can then hopefully become towards completion and construction and actual operation of those routes.
Thank you. And I think this may be my first time presenting to you all. So thank you for having me, Mimi Morisaki, Senior Regional Planner. As you've heard a few times, and again, I'll be working with Brian on these projects. So an overview of our initial planning design for these 6 routes. It will contain 3 main components. So that's the design and engineering. That would include alternatives analysis and up to a 15% design level, which would include identifying the appropriate environmental document for each of these routes and producing some technical reports as needed. We'll also be looking at the technology, and that's a big component to ensure that all of these routes can run efficiently through all these different jurisdictions. And of course, public outreach. So CBO support is front and center. We are working with our communications team to focus in on the CBOs and other community planning groups that are interested in these routes that would be affected by these routes. We would also highly encourage our consultant. We plan to hire a consultant to oversee all 6 routes for consistency. So we anticipate that consultant to contract with the CBOs as appropriate. And the CBOs, we'd ask them to send out surveys, communicate with their groups, and then also be part of the development of these routes as well. So along with that, key stakeholder meetings. So that would include jurisdictions, the owners and operators, MTS, NCTD. We'd have focused meetings with them. Again, going back to technology, that's something we definitely want to make sure that we develop with the affected jurisdictions and agencies. And of course, having meetings and gaining input and feedback from the general public through pop-up events and surveys. So these 3 main components for our project will ultimately make us eligible to apply for federal capital investment grants. And I'll get into the funding part and timeline next here. Thank you. So this alternatives analysis, initial planning design, we expect to take place over the next 2 years. And that includes all of the 6 routes that, again, we'll be going over in the next several slides. But I'll also note that Rapid 625 does have funding through the 30% design level, which would take place in the 2027 to 2028 timeline. 2029 and beyond, none of these 6 routes that we'll be planning for have funding for that yet. We still have some time to get there, but as of now, to complete 60-90% design, construction, and ultimately open these routes to the public, we do not yet have funding for.
Okay, so we'll go into each of the 6 routes, just give a quick overview of what these 6 are, why we chose them as part of this initial part. The 640, I think, is a very popular one. This is kind of what we're calling the Blue Line Express rapid version. It's something we could get in much quicker, obviously, than third tracking or doing whatever we can to the trolley system. Connecting San Ysidro to downtown San Diego. We're not showing stops on this yet because we still haven't really identified exactly which stops that would kind of come out of this work over the next couple of years. Is where should a route like this stop? How would it actually run on the freeway? Right now, there's no HOV lanes or managed lanes on the 5 in this section. So we do need to be able to give transit some sort of priority treatment. So again, working with the communities and working with Caltrans and MTS, try to figure out what exactly could we do out here. If we started to construct this in 3, 4, or 5 years and have it open in 5, 6, 7 years, what's actually feasible in the short term, and then what do they have planned for the longer term. But again, the key thing is for all these rapids, trying to get them faster than the cars that are out there stuck in traffic today. And so that's going to be the fun part with this route, is figuring out exactly like how we would do the priority treatments on the freeway portions of this, and then which stops would we want to use. And it's not easy, because if you run the route, if we have HOV lanes in the center of to the left of the freeway side, where most HOV lanes are today, that you then have to somehow get off to stop. Like if we wanted to stop at Iris or Chula Vista or National City, you either build like an inline station like we have at El Cajon University on the 15, where it's in the middle of the freeway and passengers have to cross the bridge onto the freeway and then come down, or you figure out ways to get off the freeway on the I-15 up north between Claremont and Escondido. We have those ramps that get off the managed lanes and go over to stops that are just off the side of the freeway. All of these aren't cheap, and so you try to figure out the most fastest, best way to get passengers to your route, or the route over to your passengers. So it's going to be a fun part of this route, is figuring this exactly out. And the regional plan, we always kind of talk about is 100,000 foot level. We just throw a line on the map, and I know everyone's thinking like, how exactly would that work? This is where the actual work starts happening next couple of years, is we'll start talking about what are the alternatives, how could we make a route like this actually successful. Another one is the Rapid 688. This is our Purple Line precursor. Cecily is going to be presenting after us to talk about the Purple Line, but we do know we want to wrap it out there sooner than later. This one, it's not exactly on the Purple Line alignment that we have today, obviously, because that's kind of running, we're planning for tunnels on that one, or who knows what, but this one would probably run more on the freeways, on the 805, the 15, 52, and then back on the 805, connecting again San Ysidro, but now more of the eastern sides of Chula Vista National City, through Southeast San Diego, and then up, trying to hit the new employment areas of Mission Valley at SDSU West, maybe the Kearney Mesa area, the Claremont Mesa area, and then over to Sorrento Valley, or to UTC area, and hitting that area. Again, don't ask me today exactly how it will operate. 805 has some HOV lanes. The 15 has some managed lanes, but there's not, the whole route doesn't have that yet. So we're going to try to figure out exactly how do we get the rapid faster than the regular traffic, what stops we hit, what's most important. There may be, I think out of this route, we probably would have a great alternative that maybe doesn't even go up the 15. It actually just stays on the 805 and just directly shoots up to the Sorrento Mesa UTC area. This will be a fun one to work on, because there's so many potential alternatives, and I think this one will probably be a pretty high ridership kind of a route. A third one is the 625. We had already done some initial work on this on our Next Gen Rapids study that we did a couple years ago. This is, again, is a really popular route. This is all on streets though. So this one has no freeway portions. It runs along from SDSU to Chula Vista through via College Ave, University Avenue, 54th, popping over to Euclid, and then over a plaza down in National City over to, I can't remember the street that's in National City, but it turns into 4th Street down in Chula Vista, and then maybe pop over to 3rd, and then down over to Palomar trolley station. We got a little more details on this route, so that was the fun part of the planning in that Next Gen study. We actually started looking some alternatives, where the stops would be, how we would design the stops, what kind of priority treatments we would give this one. But we'll really get further that work that we did on that one, and really try to work with the cities of Chula Vista, National City, and San Diego on what exactly they're comfortable with doing on their streets. Start working with their planners, engineers, and their electeds on exactly what this route would look like and what they're willing to do with us to make this route have that faster service. And then the fourth one that I'm kind of working on is this Rapid 483. We're working on this one kind of with Caltrans. They have a huge project to add a managed lanes connector from the I-15 managed lanes that are at Escondido and South. Eventually, there'll be some managed lanes on the 78, on the eastern portion of 78, and they're going to build a connector that connects the managed lanes from the 15 over to the 78. and that's meant for HOVs and for transit. As part of that work, they, now anytime Caltrans are doing projects, they're really trying to bundle in more multimodal type projects, which is great. So they look at active transportation type things, intersection improvements that are on the streets, and then transit projects as well. So it's kind of been great working with Caltrans more recently because they're more thinking multimodal these days. So this route would help serve this area. It doesn't exactly use that proposed managed lane connector project that they have, but they did identify, and we've been hearing from NCTD and the folks up in Riverside and Temecula, and then also at Cal State San Marcos and Palomar College, that there used to be a bus route that used to come down from there and kind of serve over into that area. And a lot of their students actually live in the Riverside area, and a lot of employees live and work up in the Riverside area and have to commute down into this area and would appreciate some sort of a rapid route. So this one will be an exciting one as well, except for the part that north of Escondido on the 15, it gets super congested during times of the day. And there are, again, no managed lanes out there today. So we'll have to figure out exactly what the Caltrans has plans for, what we can do. Maybe on this one, bus on shoulders, kind of like what we have on our South Bay Rapid today, that kind of passes congestion in certain areas when the traffic does get so bad. The bus can pop out of traffic, hit the shoulder, pass the congestion, and then pop back into the freeway once it's moving faster. That's a temporary great solution. So maybe it's a temporary solution for this. And then as they start building managed lanes and transit lanes, we could then utilize those. All right, so I'll turn it over to Mimi for the next couple.
Sure. So Rapid 880 is an east-west route. This would connect East County to UCSD. And similarly to what Brian just mentioned about working with Caltrans, this route would use SR 52. Caltrans is actively working on several projects related to SR 52. So we are collaborating with them on that project as well. And they're aware of this priority project for us too. So high level overview, this route would start in El Cajon, travel north to Santee and go west on the 52 and maybe have some stops in Kearney Mesa before eventually terminating at UCSD. So again, we plan to reach out to all of the affected agencies and stakeholders, and including UCSD, to be part of developing these alternatives that we'll analyze for this project. Thank you. And lastly, Rapid 277 would serve our more rural communities. This would start in Ramona and use SR 67 to travel south, go west through Poway, and terminate at Sabre Springs Transit Center. So this is something we are also coordinating with Caltrans on. They have other projects that they're actively working on. And we'll also be connecting with the County of San Diego and the community planning groups. And this would be an MTS route as well. So next steps, we plan to share this same overview at the Mobility Working Group next month. We'll be working on pulling existing conditions, information, so that next gen study is a good start for a couple of these projects, and also connecting with the various agencies and jurisdictions on information we should know as we're preparing to study these routes some more. We've also developed some draft goals, objectives, and performance measures that were stemmed from that next gen study that Brian and Zach had worked on last year. So at some point we will come back when we have a more formal draft ready to share with everybody and discuss. And we do anticipate some consultant support for each of these routes. It is a large lift. So each of these 6 routes will have a consultant team to support. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mimi and Brian. Clerk, do we have any comments from members of the public for this item?
Thank you. I do have 2 commenters on this item. Cesar Javier, please come to the podium. You'll be followed by Carol.
Thank you for the excellent presentation. I speak again to share, listen to you, teach you in my humble capacity, and I am addressing this to the City Heights CDC. I recognize him. He is a hardworking citizen. He has lots of history to share with you what's happening in our impoverished, left aside in this finest city. He knows it well. Please inquire from him. They have lots of funds to support your vision. That's what I share to you because it says in the book, someone is accountable. Someone must be responsible. And that's the essence of this vision
When
also.
your time has expired.
Because that's
Our
tax
final
money.
comments are on this item. Carol, please go ahead.
Arasti. Please remember Arasti.
Sir, time expired.
Good morning. Once again, this is Caro with EHC, and we're super excited about the Next Gen Rapids. I'm lifting up the 640 or the Blue Line Express Rapid and the Purple Line Precursor. It's something that we've been advocating for years. So it's very exciting to hear progress and that we could potentially see these routes in the next few years. I'm lifting them up because our communities have already been asking, what can we do to accelerate those projects? It's something that will alleviate our community members by connecting them to the places they need to be at faster, but will also provide immediate greenhouse gas emission reductions and BMT. So anything that can be done, please let us know, and we're here to support those projects. We're super excited. Thank you so much.
And that concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you, Tessa. I'm happy to open it up to any member comments or questions now. Lisa?
Hi, thank you so much for the presentation. I want to echo that we're really excited about this. And I want to highlight, it'll probably be the first of the 1,000th time that I'm going to say this. So you gotta get ready for that. I think this is an opportunity to think of design or really messy design at the border, and an opportunity to right some wrongs and some really poor decision making when it comes to planning and transit. And, even things like bathrooms, bathrooms shouldn't look like little cages. So, that's probably not going to be top of mind and priority, but I think looking at the existing conditions, remembering to look at existing conditions and a design that is community-centered, people-centered, because like I said earlier in my comments, San Isidro is not happy right now. So rolling this out is great, but it's going to be difficult. And so it's going to have to really be thought of well, and we're willing to partner on that as to where there is some key opportunities to kind of fix some things as the work is being done.
Yeah, thank you for the presentation. Brian, want to echo Lisa, and then some of the comments made by Caro earlier. I think for me, I just kind of want to, summarize on, make sure that I understood the presentation correctly. So it looks like all of these different rapid projects you guys kind of identified as potentially really helping the region and alleviating some of the congestion issues that we have. And it looks like there was funding from the board to kind of start the planning process, and that funding will take all of these projects up to kind of like environmental review, and then from there the agency will be in a position to be able to go around to federal agencies and kind of ask for the funding to make these projects happen. Correct?
100%. And the caveat is the Rapid 625, the board did give us more funding to get us further along in the planning stage. So for that route, we think we pretty sure we can get through all the way through environmental clearance and like 30% design. So that even makes that one more prime for some of those federal grants.
Yeah, perfect. Yeah, I just wanted to understand, and make sure that I understood. I know kind of looking at some of the routes, I know that there might be some that are more complicated than others. I know speaking to Caltrans, they were looking at possibly, I know you've kind of briefly touched up on it, right? And when it came to like the managed lane situations, I know Caltrans was looking at some funding and it looks like they were not successful. So I know it's going to be like, there's going to be some challenges with some of these projects, but nevertheless, all of them are very, very exciting. And I think it's going to be a good opportunity to really improve our transit system and our region. So just let us know how we can support and make all these projects happen as soon as possible. Thank you.
So I have a question about the 625, particularly in the area where it passes through Euclid Avenue in southeastern San Diego. Is the design of the route already finalized, or is there still opportunity for that to be updated?
No, yeah, we did in that first project, the next gen project for those other 3 routes, very minor analysis. So this will get further and update the work we had done and possibly change the work we had done.
Okay, and the reason I ask is because Euclid Avenue already experiences a lot of congestion, and some residents have suggested 47th Street instead as a possible route to go into, lead it into SDSU. So we'd be open to helping support further that outreach in that particular area. Thank you.
I think great presentation. I want to echo Lisa from Casa Familiares. It's really exciting to see the work that's been done, and just I want to continue to say to continue to involve the community as you're thinking about and as the design starts coming to fruition. So again, exciting times. It's great to see that we're going to be able to connect these communities and get them to where they need to go in such a quick, efficient way.
So thank you again for the presentation. I just wanted to go back. I wanted to make sure I understood. So as part of the presentation and part of the process, there will be a time that it's going to be public input, right? And that's really what's going to help us be eligible for securing more funding. That's part of the process. And I'm wondering, so we'll get all that public input, but part of the work that we've already been doing in the communities, is there any way that we can also include that input into this, or does it have to be specific to this project, or can it compound? Because a lot of, I think when we do outreach, sometimes the community will say like, we've done this before. And we don't see the improvements, like we speak our mind and we don't see the improvements that we asked for. So why should we kind of show up again? And so then us as people that are interfacing with the community, we want to make sure that we are giving them the right message. And so either that I understand that as part of this process, it always has to be new and particular to that project, or that it can be, we're bringing all that input, all that data, all that knowledge, and we're adding to it.
Yeah, I think the existing conditions report that we're going to be working on internally before we can get the consultants, we're probably not going to have on board to do all the planning work until April, May time period. We're about to put the procurement out next week. So internally, we're going to start working on the existing conditions report. Allie Fenn in our public communications office is going to be leading the public outreach portion, because they're going to put out their own procurement for the public outreach. So we may have 6 different consultants on the 6 different rapids. She's going to have just the one consultant doing the public outreach work as part of the whole thing. And so it kind of helps manage that better from her team. But during the existing conditions work that we're going to do internally, that's part of what you do. We go out and look at or get any relevant reports that have already been done, or studies or public feedback, and really try to do a good job on identifying what's already been promised and not done, or asked for and not done, or what has been done. So that hopefully will be documented well. We'll likely bring that back in the spring to have you guys review and provide more input on that. So then once we get the consultants on board, we can say, hey, we've done the existing conditions work. Here's kind of what's out there, what we've heard, what's possible, what some plans are for the future from either Caltrans or the various cities based on their community plans or what they're up to. Now let's move forward and actually start looking at the alternatives.
Belen had her hand up first, and then we'll go Carol and Jesse.
Okay. So I understood that some of the routes have been studied a lot more than others. Just so I understand, are they all moving on the same timeline or they're moving on different timelines?
Yeah, for the most part. The 625 was the only one when we did that next gen rapid study, we keep referring to, there was 3 routes in that one. The 625, the 41, or we're calling it the 471 now, on Genesee from Fashion Valley up to UCSD. And then there was one in Escondido, downtown Escondido. So those 3, and that, again, we only got to a small part of that. In terms of design. So 625 of these 6 is really the only one that's gotten below the 100,000 foot level from the regional plan at this point.
I see.
think, right? Yes.
So when can we expect that the stops will be finalized? Like this is where the route's going to run.
Yeah, a couple years from now, right? That's going to be, once we get the consultants on and start looking at the alternatives, that's going to be kind of, I mean, we're not going to go too fast, but kind of slow as well to make sure that we're fully doing it properly. So, I mean, yeah, it's over 20 next year and 2026, all of that's going to be done. So by summer 2026 is when we'll start we'll have like final reports and things like that. So really you'll be looking next fall is when we're really getting into the weeds and talking to everybody and start talking about stops, locations for the alternatives, what kind of transit priority treatments we'll want to put on each of these routes.
Okay, great. And when we build this type of infrastructure, does it increase property values or carry any risk of displacement or any other unintended consequences that you're looking at? Just curious to get the full picture.
Rapids generally not, I mean, generally I don't think there's not a ton of construction that's happening outside of the street right away. So those don't usually have as much impact as a trolley or a rail or anything like that would. I mean, I can't guarantee that, but that would definitely be, as we're starting to, so for this first part, we don't have the environmental funding except for the 625. We're going to start thinking of though, like based on these alternatives and the preferred alternative that we're kind of seeing for the other 5, what environmental work will we need to do? Will we have to do a full CEQA and NEPA documents? We're going to identify that near the end of this in late or early mid 2026. That'll help inform us as we then hopefully can get the funding for the other 5 routes to do the phase 2, which is get us through entirely through environmental. So all of that we'll kind of know based on what we have. Oh, we are kind of getting into the right of way, or we may be doing displacement or anything like that. That will help inform us like how much environmental we need to scope for the next steps.
Okay.
And then in terms of I mean, well, what was the other part you mentioned though? Economic property values, things like that, right? I mean, I think just in general, I've seen studies across the country that show that generally transit helps improve property values because, it is drawing, especially in business areas, things like that it is drawing people to and from the areas. But in terms of how that then affects displacement, that's probably a question we need to really dive into.
Okay, thank you. And those are really cool screenshots. Is there a way to see this on the open data portal or to explore that map? Like where the routes?
So the regional plan data explorer will be rolling out in a couple months. I don't know if that's here yet. How soon?
April, May.
Yeah. In the spring, we're going to have the awesome data viewer for the regional plan where you can zoom in and start clicking route by route and seeing all the attributes and things like that. So, and then for the rapid study, we'll have our own specific data viewers, but that probably won't. I mean, that we have to have a consultant on board, either the outreach and our planning consultant. So I wouldn't expect that till probably summer to have really cool data explorers for each of the routes.
Looking forward to it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Then I think Carol and Jesse.
Thank you, Brian and Mimi. Welcome to our group. I just wanted to say that I remember when we did not have a 52. And as soon as they built the 52 freeway, it was impacted immediately, as you know. So it's exciting to see this. I don't recall, we're not putting managed lanes on the 52 in this regional plan. Is that
We are.
right?
Yeah, that's planned. Yes, we are planning, and that would be in the latter part, the 2050 timeframe.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah. So this is exciting to see at least a rapid bus, at least on the 52 freeway. I would think that it would be a fairly easy route to add a rapid bus onto. So I'm really excited about that because as we know, East County does not have any major job centers. And all of the job centers are in that direction. So that's why the freeway is so impacted. But we also have a lot of residents who will use that rapid line to get to job centers. So thank you.
Yeah, so I kind of had the same question as Belen about displacement, but after hearing your response, Brian, I know that SANDAG also too is conducting like a land value graph study. Is there any I guess way for those projects to kind of converge in a way?
I'm just a transit planner. I don't know. Yeah, Danielle and Tim probably presented the land value capture program, right? But I would assume that they want us to incorporate the findings from their work and make sure that that's part of the work that we'll be doing in the transit stuff. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I'll echo my colleagues that we're excited definitely about some of these projects, the 640, 688, and 625 that are going to help get folks in the South Bay around the county. I wanted to just ask, and I know this is maybe farther down the line, but we've talked about the importance of community engagement, and I also think another part of that is education. There are a lot of folks who are already using transit. Then there are folks who would use transit, but it currently doesn't serve their needs. And then there are folks who aren't even thinking about it because it doesn't serve their needs. So I think there's those two categories where, they're not going to be looking to see what sort of transit improvements are available. And so how do we get these projects on people's radar once they're active so that we can start moving people into public transit. So that's probably down the line, but just to mention, I think it's really important that we have some sort of education strategy.
Any other comments from members of the working group? Okay. Thank you again, Mimi and Brian. We're going to move on to our next item, item 6. Cecily Taylor from SANDAG is going to share an overview of the Purple Line Conceptual Planning Study findings and options for the next steps in the planning process. Hi, Cecily.
Good morning, everyone. I'm excited to be here to be sharing the latest updates on Purple Line. Again, I'm a senior regional planner and the project manager for this project. So to recap, this group in particular is very familiar, but the Purple Line is a transit line that will eventually provide people traveling north and south between San Isidro and Sereno Mesa with a more convenient option than sitting in traffic, and will also, of course, connect all the communities in between. From earlier regional planning and corridor planning efforts, we identified that higher speeds are really critical for providing a competitive travel option, especially because these communities are spread across 30 miles. And given the long distance, the Purple Line was assumed to be a rail project, where grade separation like tunneling could allow for those stations to really connect to the hearts of the communities and would also allow the shortest distance between stations to keep travel times low. So effectively, we're talking about Purple Line as a subway, at least at this stage. Now, the route will provide dependable transportation for low-income communities and an attractive alternative to driving. It would connect to several of the transit centers, including the 3 primary trolley lines in our region and many rapid bus routes. With that, it would expand access to jobs, education, medical services, recreation, and more, improving the quality of life and providing economic opportunities for some of the region's most vulnerable communities. And the Purple Line will also help us achieve our regional mobility and climate goals. By providing an attractive alternative to driving, it can help reduce greenhouse gas emissions, fight climate change, and give these neighborhoods cleaner air to breathe. And while the mission is, or vision is ultimately to connect San Ysidro to Sorrento Mesa, as I showed, there are several other planned transit improvements in South County. You might remember I mentioned these last time I presented to you. So we really want to consider holistically how those services can best work together, and that will be done in a separate study. So for this conceptual planning study we're wrapping up, we focused on this northern section where there's a little bit less complexity, at least when it comes to the other planned transit. And the findings from this study will help inform project assumptions in the southern portion as well. So the communities in the northern portion of the line shown here, they really vary widely. Consider the difference in building heights that you see in University City and Sorrento Mesa compared to the more residential areas of National City and Canto and City Heights. And we also need to consider that all of these neighborhoods are undergoing changes every day. There's ongoing development. SDSU Mission Valley is maybe a particularly relevant example of this for this project. So the land uses, the physical constraints, and natural resources along the corridor are diverse and changing. And we took all of that into account as part of our conceptual planning study, and we'll continue to track any new developments as this project continues to advance. With our consultant team, we took a look at some similar rail projects throughout the country and summarized how long each of the project implementation steps would take for a major project like this. So what we've done so far on the left, is that early planning, just starting to look at some technical aspects of what it would mean to deliver this project as rail to the region. Now, the next phase of planning that will require taking a broader look at all of the different options for this project, the different types of transit modes, the different route options, where stations could go. And we want to bring our partners and the public along with us as we make those decisions. And that process will take time to make sure that the project we land on is the best for the community. Now, we also need to evaluate all of the engineering complexities. How are we going to cross different canyons? Where are we going to tunnel? Where will we be above ground in an aerial structure? We want to limit impacts to existing homes and businesses as well as the environment. So there's really a lot that needs to be figured out. That's why it takes the amount of time that this shows. And then from there, we would finalize and build the project through those design and construction phases. But if you think about 20 miles of rail project, maybe with a lot of tunnel or aerial structure, that will also take quite a lot of time. And for some reference, these are a few of the projects that we looked at. Towards the bottom, we have the Blue Line trolley and another Seattle example. Those didn't take quite as long as the others shown here, but keep in mind that those are significantly shorter than the 20 miles that we're considering between National City and Sorrento Mesa. And they also did not include any tunneling. Now, that first example, also in Seattle, was the longest corridor that we found. That took 21 years. But again, it had some tunneling, but not very much. So hopefully this gives you a sense of why we expect this project to take as long as it will. I also want to note that you'll see that each of these projects were funded in part by a sales tax that was approved by voters. So while we don't have enough details about what the preferred Purple Line project would be just yet, we haven't started a detailed funding strategy, but we do know that identifying local funding is going to be difficult. There are state and federal programs that can help make this project a reality, but all of those require some kind of local funding match. And for a project of this scale, it will be a big commitment. But for now, with our conceptual planning study, we took this first step at looking at what it would mean to build the Purple Line as this fully grade-separated, higher speed rail, something like a subway system. Now, we identified several options of where the route could go. I'll walk through that here, but I still want to stress that this was just a technical exploration exercise, and we are not making any final decisions as part of this. We'll need to do a lot more stakeholder and public feedback to get there. But with our exploration exercise, we did find several feasible options. In the south, we considered what it would mean for the Purple Line to continue to the border from National City or connecting to the Blue Line there in National City. Then we expect that the project would be in a tunnel through the Encanto neighborhood and City Heights. And because there are so many creeks and canyons along the way, you can see by having the Purple Line underground, we could minimize impacts to those natural areas and also the densely populated areas. And as the Purple Line continues north from City Heights, it needs to overcome the most significant elevation change along the route. That's a nearly 400-foot drop between Mid-City and Mission Valley. So we looked at a few options of how we could tackle that. We could maybe have a tunnel that goes as straight as possible. It portals out, transitions to becoming an aerial structure in the SDSU Mission Valley campus. That's one option. We might be able to stay in a tunnel through the valley, although that would be a lot steeper of a route, not ideal. Another option could be to maybe divert a little bit to the east and follow Fairmount Avenue. That would allow this Purple Line to transition to above ground a bit sooner, and then it would need to turn back to connect to SDSU Mission Valley. Being above ground does reduce the costs, which is part of why we looked at that, but it does have some trade-offs by being a little bit less direct and by having tighter turns. Those both contribute to needing to slow down the train speeds. So these are the kinds of trade-offs that we're just really starting to understand, and we'll need to work with the public and stakeholders to decide what would be the best option here. Continuing then into Kearney Mesa, depending on whether we're above ground or underground in Mission Valley, we could either have a steeper path or a more gradual path to connect into Kearney Mesa. And similar to the south, it would be possible to stay above ground as we get into Kearney Mesa. We could kind of follow the I-15 through Murphy Canyon. Here, it looks like it's above ground, that top line, but it would actually be following Murphy Canyon along the I-15 and stay above ground. And then the 1 or 2 stations in Kearney Mesa could be underground or aerial. But again, the same trade-offs I discussed. Aerial, lower costs, but slower train speeds. From there, as the Purple Line continues north to University City, it could still be either above ground or below ground. Being above ground, it would generally be following the I-805 freeway, but we would need to be really cognizant of the restrictions as we get near the Miramar airfield space. And an elevated station in UTC would probably be built between the UTC and Executive Drive Blue Line stations so that we could stay within the roadway right-of-way. Now, an underground option could go below the San Clemente and Rose Canyons there, and a station could be constructed right near UTC. But in that instance, in that alternative, we'd really need to be cognizant that the Low San corridor is also considering tunneling and possibly having a station there at the UTC Transit Center. Now, that means there could be a great opportunity to connect Blue Line service, Purple Line service, this Amtrak coaster service, and make UTC a premier transit center. But from an engineering perspective, we need to be really careful and to tackle that complex challenge of how to fit those tunnels between the high-rise buildings, how we can fit all of that service there. So it's definitely more to look at. The north of UTC, whether we're above or below ground, Carroll Canyon is another significant drop in elevation, about 300 feet. So regardless of whether Purple Line is generally above or below ground in this section, we'll likely need to have some kind of elevated structure through that canyon. And then when we get into Sereno Mesa, serving that neighborhood is also a challenge. We spent some time trying to understand what the future of that neighborhood would look like, how people could get from a station to the jobs that might be more dispersed throughout that community, and what that would mean for the demand for that station. But in the end, we did find that there are several options that could be feasible from an engineering, at least conceptual engineering perspective, and could also provide stations in the hearts of these communities. Now from there, we costed all of that out, and we found that it would take about, it would cost about $19 to $23 billion to construct this project. The range there depends on how much of that route is aerial, above ground versus underground. And that's the capital cost for building the track, the guideway. On top of that, we would need to purchase new vehicles and construct a new maintenance facility so that we could service this new subway type of transit mode in the region. And so those additional costs would be another $2 to $4 billion, where the range is driven by how far we need to connect to a maintenance site. There's a big difference between just having a little 1 mile connection or 3 mile connection. And we modeled what ridership would look like on this section of the project, so just between National City and Serrano Mesa. And from our calculations, we found about 25 to 30,000 estimated daily riders. And of those, about 10,000 would be new transit trips on the system. So this is meaningful demand, but it wasn't as strong as we might expect for a really high quality transit mode like a subway. For comparison, that ridership is more on the order of what we see on the Orange Line or the Green Line today. We think part of what's contributing to that is our regional growth forecast. Is over the next 25 years, our latest estimates are showing only about 3% of an increase in region-wide population. So that's lower than the trends that we've seen historically. It's lower than what's been assumed in prior planning. While many of these neighborhoods are zoned and envisioned to be a lot more dense, there just isn't the guarantee that that development will come. So we could not account for that in our calculations. And I will say that although that ridership is lower than we expected, the numbers are still strong enough to contend for federal funding programs, we believe, especially when we consider the historically underserved communities and the transit-dependent riders that would benefit from the project. So this is why we do these planning studies. We wanted to look at what could be possible and analyze how it would perform. So through this study, we thought we were able to identify what it would take to bring about this next level of transit technology to the region. We evaluated this as a really forward-thinking project. Given the high costs and somewhat lower modeled ridership than we expected, I think that drives home how important it will be to evaluate those other modes, determine whether or not a different option like a trolley could maybe help us reduce these costs and deliver this project to still meet our community needs. Now, even though a trolley would be slower, it does come with the opportunity to have more stations and more connections along the line. So these are the kinds of detailed comparisons that we still need to do. And while we still envision the project will, in its final form, connect San Ysidro to Sorrento Mesa, we recognize it won't be reasonable to build 30 miles, especially of a rail project all at once. So it's also important for us to identify what that phase one of the project could look like. We did look at that a bit with our conceptual planning study. We saw that the strongest ridership was in the southern portion of what we evaluated between National City and Mission Valley. It was a bit surprising. We thought that Kearny Mesa and Serrano Mesa, being large job centers, would see some demand there, but that's not what our calculations found. So that could help inform what maybe a shorter segment of phase one of the project could be. So that summarizes the major findings. I do want to point out that as all of this planning was going on, you're familiar with the regional plan that we've also been putting together to list all of the projects that are assumed to be built within the region. Now, we'll need to take into account these findings that the purple line would be more expensive and more complex than we initially thought. So while we'll continue to study the purple line in detail and really flesh out what that project will be, for the regional plan assumptions, we might need to assume a scaled back segment of what we think could be reasonable to build by 2050. We'll need to consider that a trolley could be a lower cost to implement this project than the subway. And it won't close any doors for what the project could ultimately be determined to be, but it would just reflect our best guess for the project based on this latest information. So what's next? Well, we need to start that study that would look at all of the different options for the purple line, what it would mean to implement it as a trolley, see where we could maybe do less tunneling, some other options for routing, where we could add stations or move stations, and we'll need to do a really thorough comparison of what all those alternatives would be. And this would also include significant community and stakeholder engagement so that we understand what the community needs and then narrow down to the most promising options based on that. And since we expect it will take 20 years to get rail service up and running, we're also starting that rapid bus planning study that you heard about from Brian and Mimi. And we finally need to understand all of that planned service happening in South County. That would include the Blue Line trolley, the planned improvements to that line, the Purple Line, rapid routes, and the potential extension of Amtrak and coaster service to the international border. So we need to understand how all of those services can really work together to connect those South County communities with downtown and the rest of the regional transit network. So all of these studies will be starting about in parallel next year. And I want to give a little bit more detail about the alternatives analysis, although you heard some of that from related to the rapid projects as well. But first, for the purple line, where it hasn't been decided yet what that transit mode is, we need to consider all of the different alternatives there. What the different transit modes, the different route options. And at the same time, we'll need to collaborate with stakeholders in the public so that we can agree on what are the project's goals and really key objectives. Then when we go to compare the alternatives, we can use that to determine what project is going to perform best and meet our community needs. So from there, we'll iteratively screen down, narrow down the alternatives, continuing to work with stakeholders and the community, adding more detail to those alternatives that seem to be performing the best and meeting community needs. And ultimately, we'll identify those recommended alternatives that can advance into a formal environmental analysis as the project continues into the next step towards implementation. So I'm presenting this to you today. I presented to the Mobility Working Group last week. From here, I'll go to the Transportation Committee and Board of Directors in January. And based on their input on the conceptual planning study findings and advancing into the alternatives analysis work, we'll be able to proceed with that procurement of the next step. By January, we'll have finalized that study report, and a summary of that will be posted to the project webpage. Today, I've given the summary, but the final document isn't available just yet. And the full report will also be able to be provided upon request. So with that, we'll of course continue to keep our project webpage updated. We'll use our email e-blasts as well to keep people informed, especially as we get to those outreach efforts of the alternatives analysis. But with that, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Cecily. Clerk, do we have any comments from members of the public for this item?
Thank you. I have one public commenter. Cesar Javier, please come to the podium.
Thank you. The supra law. I am addressing this to my young neighbor, City Heights, CDC, which has a congruency in what is going around planning so that people will enjoy life. That's very important. Learning, teaching. We need to, amplify how much money wasted. This is historical lesson. How much money wasted on all this planning since SANDAG was enacted into law to do circulation job. And how much money have we saved? Take note, CDC Heights representative. I am not trying to hit you. No, this is learning and teaching. Tell your leadership what's going on here. Excellent planning. Excellent.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes
Arasti,
the public comments
please.
on this item.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now we'll open it up to member questions or comments.
Hi, Cecily. Thank you for the presentation. Is it safe to say that with this planning, there'll be something significant that happens in San Isidro as well with infrastructure?
Well, we're definitely going to collaborate closely with the San Isidro, the team that's looking at the San Isidro Transit Center, so that we can understand with the different planned services, Purple Line, just one of them, what that would mean for the transit center in San Isidro.
Okay, because it's just not here, which is a red flag for me, and maybe you can provide more clarity. Like, I think we need to have some more cohesion of the considerations that different teams or different projects are going to be connecting, because in the graphic, it clearly goes to the border. And I'm assuming that's significant, whatever has to happen there, right? And
Right.
so it's, does it have its own dedicated team of or focus between the several plans that are converging at the border. And what that means, I mean, you know what it looks like, right? There's not a whole lot of space for anything. And then anytime we've said go up in San Isidro, we get BACTAT and then we get UCSD. So I think it's just really gonna encourage this book, Inclusive Transportation. The author is Veronica O. Davis. And I'm just very, very concerned that we're not hearing enough about how all of these things that kind of end at San Isidro, what is the coordination and cohesion planning that's happening right now?
Thanks, Lisa. Carol?
I was just looking at the graphic and it looks like the purple line runs parallel with the blue line for quite a ways before it splits off and goes up to 15. Is it possible to just make a transfer there rather than build a whole new line all the way down to San Isidro?
I think that's something we'll definitely need to look at with that study that looks at, you know, we identified the last regional plan identified Purple Line, connection into downtown that's now sort of seen as an extension of Losan, the Blue Line improvements. We understand that, wow, that's a lot of things that we've identified that could help South County, but let's make sure that those are going to work together. So I think that separate study that will look at all of those holistically can help identify, you know, should one of maybe Purple Line could just connect to the Blue Line and not extend or use the same track. Maybe there's not enough capacity. There's a lot of questions that study will help look at.
Yeah, I looked at that and I just thought, well, it would make more sense to just combine them if possible.
Yeah, sorry, I thought there was a question there. Yeah, just thank you for the presentation. I think the Purple Line is something that folks have talked about for a long time, and it's kind of good to see that there's some, you know, progress being made. But at the same time, you know, now that this progress is happening, there's a lot of questions, right? Some of the questions that Lisa brought up, which I think are very valid. With that too, sometimes I feel like I'm thinking more of my folks, the folks that we work with. A lot of them, you know, there's planning fatigue. We start talking about projects for a long time, and they just kind of become disengaged. I would really encourage SANDAG to really emphasize kind of like the language that is used when we're having these conversations, right? I think making it clear. I feel like the Next Gen was a pretty good example of that, kind of like elevating where we are in the planning process, right? Like we're exploring right now, then preferred alternatives and all that kind of good stuff. So I would really encourage SANDAG to really incorporate that into this effort to avoid just overall planning fatigue. Also too, it looks like it's going to be a very, very complicated project. There's a lot of questions, right? Lisa brought up some. Also too, just kind of like the geography, how long the project is. I would just kind of encourage SANDAG to consider also too what you mentioned, right? Possibly deploying this project through a phased approach, you know, and I think that's definitely encourage SANDAG to continue exploring that. Yeah, thank you.
Hi, it's good that you're trying to provide access to everybody and to be able to cater for everyone's needs. But I also see the need to like maximize whatever we have. It's good that the Purple Line has an overview of to improve the travel times and make it competitive with driving. But I guess one of the challenges why people are kind of like discouraged to use the rapid routes is because it's longer time of traveling, many bus stops that makes it more longer. I feel like beyond accessibility, which is clear that that's the need of our community, they also wanted to be there faster. So and that's why other people kind of like consider getting Lyft, which kind of congested more the freeway. Maybe I know you're doing a great job in making that route faster, but I guess if it's going to be like faster taking a public transportation, people will be more encouraged to use that. So maybe we can maximize while we're planning for Purple Line, we can maximize the other routes, how we can make it faster.
Sure.
Thank you for the presentation, Cecily. I know this, I can only imagine how complicated all of this is. And so I definitely value you and your team and the work you're doing to try to navigate all the different challenges. I do want to, reiterate what Lisa mentioned. I know at some point there was a conversation about the planning process, and there was like the northern study that was going to happen, and then the southern study, I know we're already in the process of doing the northern study, but we do know that there is a lot of ridership in South Bay, and so I think we really need to be prioritizing, South Bay, the South Bay portion of this project. I know you mentioned you saw kind of higher ridership through National City than in like the Kearney Mesa area, which was different than expected. We know there's a lot of ridership from the border, and so part of why it's so complicated to look at that area is because we've had historical disinvestments of infrastructure in those areas, and so there's like, I understand from being in, a nonprofit and having to make hard decisions. And like, this is what social equity working group is to uplift the importance of like doing the hard thing first. So just wanted to mention that. And then a question is, I'm curious, you mentioned that the ridership was less anticipated to be less than expected, and I was curious like where that data came from, if it's something that it's based on like current ridership, or kind of how all those numbers came together, and if that's something with education or access or whatever, we might see greater ridership.
So the question is how we calculated the ridership that we did.
Correct. Yeah.
There's a particular model that FTA uses when they're evaluating projects for federal funding. So we went ahead and used that model. It takes into account the existing transit network, existing transit ridership. It takes into account the land use and demographics where people are living throughout the region, and general income sort of information, job type information. And then we are able to make changes, so like adding the purple line to see how people would be expected to respond to that new option, whether they would choose it, or whether they would continue to drive, or whether they would continue to use maybe other transit routes, not this route. So it's a pretty complex model, but it's something that FTA uses to evaluate projects across the country. So we think it's a kind of defensible way of doing these calculations, and we're also able to look at the future of what that future population and population distribution will look like. So we do that using the exact same data that we're using as part of the regional plan. It's really the latest estimates forecast that we have. So hopefully that kind of helps address everything that goes into it. It's definitely complex. And at the same time, it maybe does have some shortcomings of not being able to reflect all of the nuance of what would let someone choose to take transit instead of driving, comfort and convenience and all of those things. But it's sort of the best tool that we have.
Okay, thanks so much, Cecily. And it is 11:22. We do have one more presentation. It should take under 10 minutes for the presentation. So if folks are okay potentially staying over a few minutes, I think we'd like to hear it. Okay, great. So our final presentation, we're going to welcome Sam Sanford and Jacqueline Sisk. They're going to present on the final Regional Vision Zero Action Plan and supporting safety tools, regional safety statistics, and federal performance safety targets. Welcome, Sam and Jacqueline. Thanks for hanging in there with us.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for having us here today. It's going to be lightning round, item number 7. I've had a pleasure of meeting most of you. It's great to see so familiar faces. So we're here really excited to provide this update on regional safety planning efforts. Really, it's announcing the final Vision Zero Action Plan. Was finalized very recently. And so today's item has that action plan in it, but it's a multi-part item. So Today I'm joined with my partner, Jacqueline Sisk. We're both in integrated transportation in the regional planning division. And she's going to cover the work building up to the Vision Zero Action Plan, a little bit about the plan itself, which is included in today's packet. And then I'm going to step in and talk through a target setting process, which we do annually, but we want to set that up now with the Vision Zero Action Plan finalized and inform that and get some feedback from this group about that process. So with that, I'll turn it over to Jacqueline.
Thank you, Sam. As Sam mentioned, we will go quickly over the slides since a few of these, you've already seen these in past presentations to the Social Equity Working Group. So I'll start off with the traffic safety dashboard. We created this to have a centralized safety data dashboard so that it can be a resource for local agencies as well as the public to see traffic safety all in one location. And then in previous working groups, we mentioned that we developed 2 networks within the Vision Zero Action Plan. The first one being Safety Focus Network. And within the Safety Focus Network, we found that 54% of fatal and serious injury crashes occur on just 6% of our region's roadway network. In this analysis, we did look at the social this is exclusive of all access controlled freeways, but it does include local roads and rural highways. In addition to that, we did look at social equity through the U.S. Department of Transportation's Equitable Communities tool and found that 19% of our regions is considered a social equity area, and 44% of the social safety focus network is in that same 19%. The next network that we developed was the Systemic Safety Network. This is a proactive risk-based approach, and it was recommended by the Federal Highway Administration. It identifies locations that have not experienced those high severity crash concentrations, but they are recommended areas for safety improvements. On this slide, social equity in prioritization. As a reminder, we did bring social equity in the prioritization process in both of the safety networks, and there was also a separate analysis done that evaluates crash data in those social equity areas. For public engagement, we had lots of public engagement throughout this year. With the help of our CBOs, we developed a safety pillars toolkit, and they went out into their community areas and did lots of outreach. We had digital engagement, over 15 public events. Special thank you for all our CBOs that did partner with us in our first ever Task 9 here at SANDAG. And we had lots of social media and digital engagement, as well as our technical advisory group. Now, jumping into the plan, the Regional Vision Zero Action Plan begins on page 38 of the agenda packet. And it does, we want to emphasize that every statistic in this plan represents a human life. So between the year of 2018 to 2022, 4,433 people have died or suffered life-changing injuries on our roadways in the San Diego region. So this is why Vision Zero exists and why SANDAG developed a Vision Zero action plan. The goal of Vision Zero is to eliminate traffic fatalities by designing systems to reduce the severity of human error, but we know that mistakes are inevitable, but fatalities don't have to be. So by prioritizing safety, Vision Zero not only expands the mobility options, but we also enhance health and quality of life. On this page is just an overview of our plan organization that you see as an attachment in our report. So Chapter 1 discusses about Vision Zero. Chapter 2 is understanding the problem. Chapter 3, developing solutions. And Chapter 4, how do we get to zero? So the goal is to institutionalize the change in all that we do. With this in mind, we developed, we wanted to weave in safety and a typical SANDAG process and rules that we have. We created a structure that you see on the screen with 7 implementation actions. So starting from left to right, we have coordinate, advocate, plan, fund, educate, evaluate, and implement. And if you look at Appendix C in the attachment for the agenda packet, you will see a full list of implementation actions, and it goes greater into detail with the 7 implementation actions. But I do want to discuss 3 in depth, which is fund, plan, and implement. So for fund, we have SANDAG manages 2 grant programs, the Active Transportation Program, as well as the Smart Growth Incentive Program. And the criteria has been updated for both of those grants to align better with the Vision Zero Action Plan, as well as the close proximity of projects that are located on the safety networks. And points are awarded to projects that have improvements that incorporate safety. The next one is plan. So we are looking to support local jurisdictions with the new legislation. So Assembly Bill 43, which is now fully in effect, provides more flexibility for owning agencies to reduce speed limits on the roadways that they own. So SANDAG, with the help of our consultant team, is providing technical support in developing a safety corridors analysis so that we can help local jurisdictions with this analysis so that they can lower speeds on their roadways. For implement, we developed a local agency Vision Zero resource hub, and we're working with local agency staff to provide this online resource for them. Essentially, it's a product development tool for local agencies to see data, the networks, and then prioritize elements and scoring. The resource hub also houses the digital outreach engagement that we did last winter on our social pinpoint, and it has ideas for countermeasures or safety solutions based on risk factors on portions of the network. So for next steps, as discussed in the previous slide, the top of the list is Assembly Bill 43 implementation support. We're planning to convene with local agency staff in the beginning of December to showcase the analysis that has been conducted, and then they can have the choice of whether they would like to use that analysis to reduce speed limits. And then the next bullet down is 2025 regional plan, similar to the 21 plan, which has a policy element within Vision Zero. 25 plan is similar, and we'll have elements with insights of the plan's development. And then we are going to continue support with our local agency staff. So this plan will make them eligible for the SS4A grant. And then I will pass it off to Sam now to discuss performance measure 1 target setting. Sorry for the lightning speed presentation. I can breathe now.
It's the Cliff Notes version.
Yeah.
So I've been coming back to this group for several years, talking about annual target settings for safety, and many of the asks has been, because often SANDAG adopts the statewide targets, which is an option that MPOs like SANDAG has, but it's been an ask of working groups like this group and others to say, why don't we have regional targets? And part of the answer was we didn't have a safety plan. Well, now we do, so we want to start looking about how to set up regional safety targets. One key change is, the second bullet on there is setting up a 3-year target for decision-making. Federally, we're required to set up an annual target every year, and we'll do that process, but we want to set up a process looking 3 years out, because a 1-year target doesn't get ahead of decision-making. Essentially, the capital improvement programs, the work programs, were all decided by the time the target is established for the following year, so that target doesn't have an opportunity to inform decision-making of like, oh, this is our target for safety, we should invest in this certain area. It's already settled by then. So that's the 3-year decision-making or 3-year target approach. And then also on this slide, we have the 5 measures that are required by the Federal Highway Administration. A little bit about the process. We do look at current trends and influencing factors, and then we try to anticipate missing year data and the expected future. What does that look like? This is our region's fatalities, 2013 to 2022 as an example. We establish a trend, we figure out how we're doing in a region. Unfortunately, most of the graphs look like this. They're increasing over time. Things are getting worse. Then we try to anticipate where in this future do we think we're going to be 2027. That's what we want to try and decipher to back calculate to the required 2025 target. But you'll notice there's a big gap. We don't know the data. We don't know the conditions for 2023 and 2024. So we have to estimate that. And then essentially we have this cone of uncertainty of where we're going to go in the future. There are certain factors that are pushing safety to improve, others that are holding it steady. And so that's one of the pieces that we want to talk briefly about is these influencing factors. So supporting influencing factors, by that we mean factors that are improving safety. New assembly bills like the aforementioned Assembly Bill 43 that Jacqueline talked about, reducing speed limits on a portion of the local jurisdiction's roadways, increasing intersection visibility, where there'll be a prohibition on parking vehicles near crosswalks. That's going to go, it's in effect starting January for enforcement. Other bills also supporting safety. So there's a lot of movement in that regards. There's also new projects that have opened up. Maybe there's new crosswalks, new intersection designs that have also opened or will be opening. Other influences, we don't have as much information to know how they affect safety, such as demographics, changes in the vehicle fleet, and the economy also drives traffic use. So if we look at our region, the next 5 slides, I'll just pan through pretty quickly. They look very similar. Here we are looking at total fatalities. It's an upward trend going in the wrong direction. Looking at fatalities by rate, so this is normalized by vehicle miles traveled. It's flatter, but in the most recent few years, it's had an uptick. For serious injuries, again, going in the wrong direction. The blue line on there is the 5-year rolling average, which is the calculation that the federal highway requires of us. And then serious injury rate, again, uptick. And then the last is a combo measure that looks at vulnerable users. Essentially, it's the sum of the serious injuries and fatalities for cyclists and pedestrians. Again, going in the wrong trend. So the quick questions that I'd love to get any feedback from this group. 2 items are there any influences, safety influences that we didn't mention that we should be considering? So we talked about legislation and projects and economy, others along those lines. And the second would be, the target setting is in part data-driven, but it's not 100% data-driven. It's also where we anticipate moving towards and where we want to get to. So with that in mind, staff is looking at a proposed target of essentially a flattening of the trend, stopping that rise and flattening it down to at least stabilizing it at the current levels. And to hear responses from this group would be wonderful. And if you're supportive of that, or you think it should be decrease or increase, anything along that nature, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Jacqueline and Sam. Before we open it up to comments from the working group members, do we have any comments from members of the public, clerk?
Thank you. I have one public commenter on this item. Cesar Javier, please come to the podium.
Thank you. I am now speaking as a father and always be a soldier. Leadership of SANDAG gave his State of the Nation address. That was fantastic. We heard it in heaven. Look back, planners like me. Look back. Develop that intuition. We cannot defeat nature. We cannot. But we can defeat man-made threat. We can only protect human and the thing. How do we safeguard priceless lives, property from act of God? Geographically, we have impact of the sea, flood, climate change, San Andreas fault, and also act of man. How do we address litigation after litigation, wasting that precious money for our homeless people? Our city, District 9, is failing in ruling.
Thank you. Your time has expired. That concludes the public comments on this item.
Thank you, Tessa. I'm happy to open it back up to members of this working group to address the 2 points that Sam had mentioned. Any comments, questions, thoughts? Jesse?
Just really quickly, I don't know if you guys have had the chance to last week, Circulate San Diego, they also released the report and then, talks or they had similar conversations and one of their findings was that, yes, we're seeing a increase of serious accidents, but at the same time, accidents, the number of accidents that are happening are kind of like flat. So what that tells us is that the types of accidents that we're having are just being more serious, right? Like people are getting hurt more. So that's something that I wanted to point out. In their report too, it kind of highlights, hey, if we kind of have the similar infrastructure, like would it be down to how fast folks are driving in the street? And that's what's, increasing like all the seriousness of these accidents, and also to the types of vehicles. I know, like, just on my own, like, kind of researching like the data trends on what people buy. People like in the US tend to buy kind of like bigger vehicles, and that means when there's an accident, there's a higher likelihood of if it's someone walking or not driving, of them getting hurt more serious. So those are just some kind of comments. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I like to see there was all of it event in the report. That was cool. But I kind of forgot what the question was. Could you scroll back to that particular slide? I think I was kind of, okay, super, thank you. I was kind of going along the same lines as Jesse on do we know what the causes of these fatal and serious accidents were? And, kind of based on those trends, like tackle certain areas where we're seeing, if it is speeds, that's a behavior. And so that means we need to be pushing on education. If it's road conditions, then that's, policy and infrastructure, then that needs to be a priority. So I was kind of, thinking along the same lines of like prioritizing where the biggest impact will be. I think that's all I got. Thank you.
And I guess, like, going back to kind of answer your question, I think the priority right now should be kind of like flattening that kind of trend. I know the region as a whole has made like significant investments like throughout like San Diego, just to kind of make our streets better. And I feel like just from living in San Diego, it is a better experience. But I think there's other factors to consider too, beyond kind of like what I shared earlier.
I've visited cities where there's very active campaigns and for awareness, because when you look at that data, it's startling and it's scary, right? And frankly, I just don't think people are aware, and so they are not actively thinking about it. And when they see a pedestrian or a cyclist, they're not going to be as careful because they don't realize what a big problem we have. And so I've been to places where, like, I'm seeing it on TV, I'm hearing it on the radio of, that this is a problem, and every driver and cyclist needs to be aware and play their role. So I think just that should be part of the activities and the funding to create an awareness campaign.
Yeah, thank you so much for the presentation. I really wish we had more time to delve into the specifics of it, because I think it's so important, especially when we see our regions and the impact on our regions. And I would just kind of echo when I think I saw that it was like 24% of young adults are part of the fatal or like serious victims. So I think we do a really good job, at least I know in my community, I feel like we do a really good job in terms of cyclist safety for like an elementary school and the middle school. But when we're talking about young drivers, and when we're talking about maybe putting some regional statistics, like even maybe like a media toolkit, right? Something that we can disseminate that is region specific, right? In our community, these the crashes or whatever, it looks like this for our community. And so that we could help create some of that awareness, right? Because we want to do our part as well in terms of making sure that our community is safe and knowledgeable about statistically how often this could happen to them and hopefully, help. I don't know. I just think that education piece is important. So if you could help us because you guys have the data and you guys have it specified by region, then we can disseminate that in our communities. And hopefully that will contribute as we're then working towards all the other things that contribute to this.
Oh, yeah, just to add with the education piece that you're sharing. So I think you did a good part because there some signs were like where you need to stop and cross is very, very visible in San Diego. Well, maybe because this is where I am most of the time, but it's very visible. So you did a great job on that. I was just like wondering, like, because we already did a lot with the community. Like, what about the education piece of the drivers? Like when they get their license in DMV, maybe your data you can share to DMV so we can educate new drivers and even the previous drivers who doesn't want to change. It's hard to teach old dogs new tricks. So maybe there's like a part there that they can be retrained or educated so we can avoid this, because I think above everything, above the science, above the caution, about all everything we do, the lighting and all of that, I think it's still the driver that has the wheel and they should be well trained and educated. Thank you.
Claire and then Jennifer.
I just I think this driver behavior just keeps coming up, and cell phones are a big part of that. And the more our future generations are more attached to their cell phones than, some of us and our elders are. And so I just think that may be part of the trend as well, is just like technology. And so I think there's an education piece around that. And then I don't know how much influence there is, but I know there's like cell phone or there's like driver mode on cell phones, including that in educational efforts and like the why. I think it's a big part of it.
Yes, I just want to, kind of emphasize everybody. I'm on board with the education piece, but also taking into consideration policy considerations that not only affect speed limits and driving behaviors, but also e-bikes and other forms of transportation. I know up in North County, and I'm sure it's region-wide, many of the cities are taking e-bikes into a more serious account and implementing different policies accordingly regarding safety and speeds and that sort of thing. But education, when you get an e-bike, I think is essential, especially the younger kids. I see them everywhere without helmets or not strapped or hanging on the handlebars or something along those lines. So I think it's going to be a more comprehensive approach to educate not only the cyclists, the pedestrians, but also the drivers, but then also general public and policymakers so that they can understand where the issues are that they need to care for in their policymaking.
Anyone else? Okay, thank you again, Jacqueline and Sam. We appreciate the presentation. Thank you, members, for staying. I'll just ask for one more quick moment of your time before we adjourn. I want to give a special thanks to our clerk, who is retiring after nearly 20 years at SANDAG. And I understand this is her last public meeting. So thank you for always supporting us, Tessa. And with that, we'll move on to our adjournment. No December meeting. Enjoy all your holidays. And we look forward to seeing you back in this space January 23rd at 9:30 a.m. at 11:47.